Story 1. Human composting. If it is legal where I live, then recycle me for other organisms to use. Reason: burial is very expensive in the United States. Cremation requires a large amount of energy to reduce a body to ash, which creates significant pollution. I do not need a stone or plaque to mark my remains. Who I was will live on in the memories of people who knew me. My physical remains will not matter to me. I only hold onto those molecules and atoms temporarily anyway. Story 2. Cremated and scatter the ashes in the sea. I don't want my children feeling guilty about maintaining a grave plot. Story 3. Why does it matter that I am dead? Funerals are not for the dead. They are for the living who have to keep going. Story 4. My top choice is sky burial, though I know that will not be a possibility. My second choice is being composted. My third choice, if I must be buried, is to be totally green. No embalming. No chemicals. No coffin. Just my naked body in a shroud or simple cotton garment that will easily and naturally decay. Story 5. Cremation is my second option. My first choice is to catapult my body through Mitch McConnell's front window. Story 6. Water cremation is not yet legalized in all states. The funeral industry in America is expensive, and I do not want anyone to spend a fortune on my arrangements. Story 7. Cremated. I would like my remains to be spread somewhere special, not just rotting in the ground where they could be vandalized. Story 8. I think I would definitely prefer to be buried or cremated when I die. When I am alive, neither option is good. Story 9. I would choose cremation, not the quiet urn on a mantelpiece, but a Viking pyre set adrift, ignited by a single arrow. It is not just theater. It is a return. Every atom in me was forged in the heart of a star, scattered across time and space before coming together briefly as me. To send that matter back into the void, into the wind, the water, the cosmos feels like closing the loop exactly as it began. Story 10. Did you know that it is perfectly legal in many places to be buried on your own property? Build a wooden box out of scrap wood. Place my body in it. Add a few useless trinkets that I liked if it makes you happy. And bury me deep enough in the backyard where I will not bother you with any unpleasant smell. I bet you could do it for less than the cost of cremation. Story 11. I always say I want my remains scattered from a height, but no cremation. Seriously though, I am dead and do not care. Take whatever bits can be reused or recycled, and please dispose of this container responsibly. Story 12. A body is cremated because it undergoes rot and decay. Your soul is who you are, and once it is gone, there is no point in keeping the body around. Story 13. I am deceased, so I do not care. I leave that to my loved ones, whatever they are more comfortable with or can afford. Story 14. Water cremation is better for the environment, and my remains will take up less space. My family is not keeping my ground bones. They will be placed in a mausoleum at the cemetery, where many cremated remains are stored in individual slots. Story 15. I would rather be cremated so children cannot dig up my remains as a skeletal zombie. Scientists cannot analyze me. Story 16. I would choose cremation, not because I have any concrete evidence to support it, but the thought of my ashes returning to the earth and nourishing plants, animals, and the circle of life brings me a strange sense of peace. It feels like my life force would carry on, moving through nature, instead of being trapped in a box forever. Maybe it is odd, but that is the idea I have in my mind. Story 17. Cremated. I don't think it matters what happens to my body after I'm dead. I won't be able to tell. As a living person, I am claustrophobic, so I hate the idea of being trapped in a small, buried box. Also, why keep a dead body around for hundreds of years taking up space? Story 18. I always thought that I wanted to be cremated. Something about being in the earth just didn't seem to sit right. Then I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about our energy being lost into the cosmos when you get cremated. It sounds like such a definitive end. When you're buried, your energy returns to the cycle of life. So your energy is absorbed instead of being radiated out. Now I'm kind of mixed. One of those urns where your body grows into a tree almost seems like the most viable option. Or maybe the option where they make you into a synthetic diamond. I saw on the news that a man's son died. He took his ashes and had them turned into a diamond ring. Now he can watch his sunshine every day. Nas. Story 19. You can be both cremated and buried. I did this with my dad and his cremated remains. I buried his cremated remains in a special urn I had designed for him in a family plot. I wanted him to have a final resting place, rather than somewhere in my house. This is what I also want done for myself. I don't care what happens to my body when I die. I will be dead. If I can take the financial burden off my family, I much prefer that. Story 20. Cremated. This way, my family does not have to pay for an expensive casket or embalming. Let them keep the money, not the funeral home. Story 21. Cremated. Less hassle, and if my future children want, they could keep some of my ashes. I did this with my grandparents. Story 22. If it were legal in my area, neither. I would rather have an open-air burial. Let my body return to the earth. Let the vultures pick at my bones, and the scavengers eat the rest. Dust to dust, baby. Story 23. Since being buried without a coffin is not an option, I will choose cremation instead. Takes up less space, and you can still sprinkle my ashes on a tree or something. Story 24. I plan on donating my body to science, but if those are the only two options, then I prefer cremation. I do not want my fluids or remains to leak into the ground or harm the environment. I would rather not release them into the atmosphere either, but cremation at least allows the ground space to be used for more important things like trees or farming. Story 25. I have, as I hope many of you also do, marked my driver's license giving doctors permission to donate any of my usable organs for transplant upon my death, as I hope most of them extend other people's lives. I would just as soon they burn the rest of this body. I've gotten some pretty good miles out of it. Story 26. I want to be put into one of those decomposition pods with a tree planted over it. Then I will just need a speaker for the dead. Story 27. I really want to be used as food by a tree. Just search for tree pod burial. It is illegal to alter burial sites. I would die knowing that the tree would most likely not die at the hands of another human. Story 28. I would rather my whole body be donated to science. Whatever is not used can be used as food for animals or for compost. Story 29. Buried. Why burn fuel to turn my body into pollution? Bury me without embalming in a wooden box so I can decompose and return my energy to the soil to become new life. Story 30. It doesn't matter. I'm dead. Imagine my family chooses to put me in a casket, and I wake up saying, "Excuse me, don't I get a say in this?" Story 31. I've always had my heart set on an aerial burial. There is something deeply personal about your early vessel being returned to the cycle of energy. The United States frowns on that kind of thing, though, so they ruin my life by arresting me for it. Pro tip: do not try to feed yourself to carrion eaters. Story 32. No preference. Put me in a cardboard box and toss me into a ditch on the side of the highway. Not my problem. Story 33. Sky burial. Let the scavengers feast. Seriously, though, I agree with Diogenes on this one. Toss my body over the city walls and let me be devoured by the scavengers tonight. Story 34. Whichever option is cheaper and less of a hassle for the people who will have to take care of it is preferable. They are the ones who will care about how to dispose of my body. Story 35. Whatever is cheaper, I do not really care. I think cremation is easier. I would rather my family use the money from my estate to be happy than pay several $1,000s for a fancy coffin. Story 36. I am not really going to have the option, so however they dispose of it. I am probably just thinking about donating my body to science, however that works, so it will not just go to waste. I will see. Story 37. I do not think I will live to see the zombie apocalypse. For that reason, I want the chance to come back for a second life. Nothing but a Flava Flav clock chain on my neck. That would be pretty funny for survivors. Story 38. 1. Open casket wake. 2. Cremation. 3. Funeral service. I like the idea of spreading ashes in the forest, but I have received a lot of comfort from being able to visit the graves of loved ones to be with them physically while processing heavy thoughts. I think I will leave it up to my next of kin whether they want to bury or scatter me in full or part, keep me on the mantle, or turn some of my ashes into a gem or something. Story 39. Cremated, no funeral. Save your money. My body is literally going to rot. I do not need a silk pillow or cushy coffin for that. Story 40. Buried, ideally in a container that would decompose relatively quickly. I think it's important to have a burial plot for friends and family to visit. My religion has a preference, though not a requirement, for burial over cremation. I do not like the idea of embalming, but it does allow for a funeral to take place at a later date without unpleasant odors. I want to give my family as much time as they need to coordinate a funeral. Cremation would be a second choice if we are in a difficult financial situation when I die. Ideally, I want to leave my wife and children a modest inheritance so that I can indulge my end-of-life preferences. If that is not the case, I certainly do not want dealing with my body to be a burden. Story 41. I told my wife that when I die, I want the money meant for my funeral to be used to have my body sent to a taxidermist and stuffed. That way, I can be seated on the couch in the living room with a controller in one hand and a coffee in the other, so she will have a constant reminder of me and pine over me without moving on. Or whatever happens, cremate me or bury me, it does not matter because I will be dead. Story 42. I will be dead. I do not really care. Just toss my body in the woods and use the funeral money to have a party. Story 43. Cremated. I told my husband if he dares put me in the ground with all the bugs, I will come back and ruin him. Story 44. Cremated. I do not want to sit in a box and turn to goop. Also, cemeteries are a waste of space. The whole burial process is a racket. We are paying around $20,000 to bury my in-laws because it is a religious practice, and I am okay with it. However, that seems too much for me. Cremate me and place the ashes somewhere nice. Story 45. Composted. If that is not possible, then just bury me in the ground to decompose. No fancy coffin, no embalming, and no funeral. Story 46. I would rather be buried because I feel if someone came to my final resting place, it would feel like I am actually there. Being cremated causes complications since I am buried across the country in my hometown, and burial would be easier for transport when I pass. Story 47. I go back and forth. Cremation. My family can keep some ashes of me in a keepsake, so I can always be with them. Burial. I could be placed near my mother. Story 48. Cremated. The United Kingdom is not very large and is becoming more populated all the time. While I appreciate a good cemetery, I do not believe we can justify using more land for the deceased when many living people are without homes. Story 49. Cremated because then they can play fireball while they do it, and I get to sit on my best friend's mantle and watch her from the afterlife. Story 50. Just dump my naked corpse into a hole. No clothes, no burial shroud, no coffin, no vault, no tombstone. Just cover me with dirt and plant an orange tree on my grave so that my decaying body can bring food to the next generation. Story 51. Buried ideally under an apple or pomegranate tree, something with fruit, so that my molecules can return to the earth and my loved ones can have an apple or two and remember me. Story 52. Buried so I have a grave to visit. I am not trying to be selfish, but having lost some family members who were cremated, I wish they had a grave to remember them by and visit occasionally. Story 53. Honestly, I couldn't care less. I'm going to be dead. Whatever my relatives want to do with my body is up to them. Story 54. Cremated, but it will not be my choice. Funerals and similar ceremonies are the domain of the living. My body will be an empty shell after I am dead. Dispose of it as you see fit. I do have money set aside for it. Story 55. Green burial for me. I want the worms and the fungus to eat me so that birds can continue the cycle of life. Has nobody watched The Lion King? Story 56. I told my wife I do not care one bit what is done with my body when I am dead. If it makes her happier to bury me, cremate me, or donate my body to science, whatever makes her happiest, because I will not need it anymore. Story 57. I'm still trying to understand this one. Chuck Schumer said Ruth Bader Ginsburg is turning over in her grave. Story 58. When I am dead, I sincerely do not care what they do to me. Sell my body to the highest bidder, no questions asked, and give the money to charity. Story 59. After harvesting viable donor organs, I want to be cremated and, if possible, launched into space. Story 60. Buried, but not traditionally. There are companies that will essentially mulch your body and place you in a pod with a tree sapling. Instead of a gravestone, you get a tree. Instead of my body lying in a box that will never see the surface again, the biomass can be broken down and redistributed. Cremation leaves unusable ashes on a mantelpiece somewhere, which seems wasteful. Story 61. Green burial lets nature take me away. Cremation uses energy and pollutes the air. Traditional burial uses chemicals. No thanks. Story 62. I live in a state that allows composting. I was all for cremation over burial for a very long time, but I found out that the amount of fat in my body makes that dangerous and expensive. If I have to be buried, I want to return the nutrients and elements that make up my body back to the planet. Story 63. I think cremation would be my option. I don't like the idea of my body being broken down by worms over the years. I agree with the other person. Dispose of me quickly. Story 64. Cremated. I do not want to permanently take up any precious land. Sprinkle me in a forest and let me return to nature. I also do not want anyone to spend a lot of money on a service for me. Story 65. Cremated. So much cheaper than burial, which is ironic because one of my hobbies is touring cemeteries. Story 66. Aquamation produces fewer emissions compared to cremation. Also, I do not want a coffin or anything like that. Story 67. I don't really care. I'll be dead. I'm fine with my family doing whatever they want with my body. I would even be fine with them donating it to science. Story 68. I do not see any drawback to being cremated. Besides, wearing a suit and decomposing in a coffin buried in the ground seems strange when you really think about it. Cremation has increased from about 4% in 1960 to roughly 60% now, with an anticipated 80% by 2040. Story 69. The idea of using acres of land to store deceased individuals is repugnant to me. Additionally, there is a cemetery being debated in my area, and water contamination is a significant concern. Story 70. I told my wife she can cut off and preserve her favorite tattoos of mine and cremate the rest. If she moves, she can take me with her or use me as fertilizer to regrow nature. Story 71. I hate cutting grass and I'm sure I'm not alone. Get buried, get a tombstone, and someone will be mowing the lawn around your tombstone 100 years from now when no one on planet Earth remembers you. Dumb. I'll opt to get incinerated to save my friends from future headaches. Story 72. Cremated, and my will would include specific instructions for what to do with my ashes, designed to give my family the adventure of a lifetime as a parting gift. Then, at the end, they find out I faked my death just to bring everyone closer together. Story 73. Cremation is less expensive and better for the environment, short of one of those eco-friendly, grow a tree from my body cocoon burials. Story 74. I am going to be cremated and do not care what is done with my ashes. Toss them in a dumpster for all I care. I will be too dead to know or care where the ashes are tossed. Story 75. Cremation. Cremate me and place me in a grave at the local cemetery. End of story. It is cheap and easy. I am dead, so it does not matter to me. Story 76. Neither. I do not want to be burned or buried when I am possibly still alive, and that is my fear. Story 77. Cremated. I decided this when I learned about funeral costs in college. There is no way I am making my family pay so much to put me in a box in the ground. Story 78. Cremated, if those are the only options. Burial is environmentally untenable, but ideally, I would rather my remains be composted. Story 79. Cremation takes less space, and we are all going back to the earth anyway. So what does it matter? If it is about memories, the people who love you will remember you. Story 80. Celebrate me like Hunter S. Thompson, shot out of a 30-foot cannon shaped like a giant fist. Alternatively, bake me into a sheet of lysergic acid diethylamide and drop me while at Disneyland. Story 81. I want to be buried but not embalmed. I would like the earth to be able to use me. A headstone with no box. Story 82. Buried in a biodegradable container with a tree or flower bush planted on top in a place where my family can visit me. My husband is a science teacher and came up with this idea to be kind to the earth, while also giving our family a way to see us if that will help them grieve. Story 83. Cremated. If I live to the average age of the women in my family, I will not have much family left to mourn me by the time I die. I do not need to take up space in a cemetery when I am dead. Story 84. I have major claustrophobia. The thought of being buried in a box for eternity gives me more anxiety than I can handle. Story 85. Cremated. If my children moved from the area, I would not want them to feel guilty about not visiting my grave. Story 86. I would like to be cremated. I want my ashes to be mixed with my infant twin boy's ashes, and I would like a weeping cherry tree to be planted with us. I have 2 living sons, and I want my twin boys to be with me in death. I want to be placed under a tree because I want the 3 of us to create something beautiful from our shared tragedy. Story 87. Cremated and ashes scattered in the woods. It is cheaper, and I personally think being buried is a waste of money. My wife is not a big fan of cremation, so I told her to bury me in a simple pine box. She is not a big fan of that either, but she understands I want everything to be simple and inexpensive. Spend money on a party celebrating all the good times and honoring my memory, not on making me look nice just before you cover me with dirt. Story 88. Cremated. No fuss, certainly no coffin. Cardboard box for me. As cheap as possible. No way am I paying £1,000 for a medium-density fiberboard box to then just set on fire. My preference is to take matters into my own hands. As soon as I get any terminal diagnosis, I start looking at cruise deals. A couple of years ago, I went on P&O Ventura. We stayed in room D735, looking into the wake of the ship with nothing below. Some of those Velcro ankle weights, stand on the little balcony table, sit on the railing, and fall backwards into the sea. Do it on the evening before a sea day. Put do not disturb on the door. Leave your note. It will be 24 hours before they even realize you are not there. That's the way for me. None of this headstone or cremating nonsense. On my terms. No fuss. Story 89. I want nothing more than for my friends and family to spread my remains in all my favorite spots. I do not want to be cremated, though. Story 90. Cremated. My ashes will be spread at Frenchman's Bay in Maine, specifically in a small cove in front of my grandparents' home. I will join my mother and youngest brother there, along with my grandparents. My family has always loved the sea, so I cannot think of a better resting place. I have spent many decades in veterinary work and am not concerned about my body. If parts of me can help someone else, they are welcome to them. Afterwards, let the ocean receive me. Story 91. If they allow it in the future, I will shoot into space toward the Andromeda Galaxy. Someday I will be the first one there. Story 92. Cremation. I'm not into embalming, silk-lined caskets, or viewings. I don't like the idea of putting formaldehyde and plastic in a box in the ground and leaving it there forever. It seems wasteful. If my family wants to keep me, they can put me in an urn. If it's an option, I'd like a clean burial, wrapped in a plain cloth and buried in dirt on some private land or preserve, maybe with some jewelry, knives, or clay pots Neolithic style as a little treat for the archaeologists. Story 93. Cremated. I want my ashes dumped in the ocean. Originally, I wanted them in my sister's toilet so she could take one final act of spite before I am gone forever. My lawyer refused to put that in my will. At least he understood why I made no provisions for her. Story 94. Cremated. Death in a coffin terrifies me. I have never liked cramped spaces like coffins, and I would much rather be on my family's china hutch than in the ground. Story 95. Growing up, I always wanted a Viking funeral. Make a pyre on a small boat, douse it with gasoline, and put me on top. Take the boat 50 yards out into a lake. Then let the attendees shoot at it with flaming arrows until it catches fire. Then, everyone has a party on the beach until the fire goes out. Story 96. I want to be cremated and have my ashes put into a Viking war sword. No matter what, if I know I am going to die at a certain time, I want to die fighting so that I can go to Valhalla. Story 97. I want to be buried in one of the mushroom bags. They do not embalm you, and you decompose back into the earth. Story 98. I would like to be mummified and placed within a tomb with a sword so I can be a final boss fight eventually. Story 99. I hope that by the time I die, Egyptian mummification will have made a comeback. If it does, then that is what I want. Story 100. Cremated 100%. I do not want to be put on display to the public. Honestly, the idea of being stuck in a box for centuries until my bones turn to dust makes me queasy. I would rather be released to the universe so my remains can become part of the living world. The circle of life is beautiful. Being in a metal box disrupts that. Story 101. Whichever option is cheapest. My family deserves not to spend money. I will be gone. My body is just a container. I do not want real estate dedicated to it either. Unmarked. No grave. Minimal cost. No religious rituals. Story 102. Cremated. My wife and I have already purchased our columbarium niche. Since I was a child, I felt cemeteries were a waste of land. Now that I am older, I can appreciate the park-like atmosphere of newer cemeteries. Regardless, I will be cremated. Story 103. Cremated and buried in a biodegradable urn with fertilizer and a tree seed. Not only will I plant the tree I will never sit in the shade of, I will be that tree. Story 104. I'm going to be composted. It seems like a natural way to go. I'd rather feed the bugs than be incinerated. Story 105. I would like to be buried. I am a genealogist and want to have a grave and headstone that my distant descendants can visit in the future. Story 106. Cremated. The idea of being placed in a ridiculously expensive box just to decompose is not for me. No thanks. Just cremate me. My husband wants a full Viking funeral. I am considering donating my body to science because I have a couple of rare diseases that could potentially provide valuable learning opportunities. Story 107. There should be a place where they take your body in a helicopter and drop it near a pack of wolves or lions. Story 108. I would say cremate. It is supposed to be cheaper. Not sure by how much. At the end of the day, I do not think I will really have a choice even if I tell family. I do not care. I am dead. Bury me. Cremate me. Strap me to a rocket and test out explosives. Whatever is cheapest. I do not need a $15,000 casket to be put in the ground. Story 109. If cryogenic freezing were an option, I would choose it to see if I could be revived in the future. Otherwise, I would choose cremation so that my potential descendants do not have to pay for the funeral costs. Story 110. I have always told my family to take anything useful and dispose of my body in the dumpster behind the Burger King. That Burger King closed, so now I prefer cremation after all valuable items are removed and given to whoever needs them. Story 111. Neither. I would prefer to be turned into a diamond, added to a necklace as a pendant, and have it delivered to my ex to spite her husband since I dislike him. Story 112. In the words of someone much wiser than me, I am dead. What do I care? Chuck me in a ditch, a dumpster, or shoot me into the sun. It will not matter to me because I am already dead. Story 113. Ideally, anything that does not take up space, but practically you can prop my body up in a corner for all I care. I am gone. Story 114. Cremated. I do not want the embalmer to handle my body. I do not consent. And I do not want fuchsia pink lipstick. Story 115. Cremated. Do not waste any money on me. I could care less if anyone even identifies or claims my body. Save the money. What do I care? I am dead. Story 116. Cremation is a more affordable option for my wife and son. Additionally, The family members who did not want to see me while I was alive do not deserve the privilege after I am gone. Story 117. Burned on a funeral pyre. I like the old ways that way my ashes can be released into the heavens and my spirit is free to flow to the other side. Story 118. Cremate my body and pour my ashes into the river in my hometown, so that the tiny dust particles will attach to water molecules as they evaporate and reach the jet stream. Eventually, I will circle the globe, endlessly becoming rain and soil. Story 119. If they can harvest anything useful, go for it. Otherwise, dispose of my husk in the least troublesome way, which I guess is cremation. I don't need any fancy box or special place on a shelf. Dump them someplace in the mountains. Ashes to ashes. Story 120. Carried to an altar on top of a mountain where I will be picked apart by birds. But since I will be dead and no one wants to do that, they can recreate the night that Patty Murphy died. Story 121. I want my skull removed from my body to be used as a decoration around the house and as a prop for Hamlet. Jewels placed in the eyes are preferable. I want the rest of my body fossilized. Story 122. Cremated. I have a plan to have my ashes in a trough at the funeral with small plastic urns so anyone who wants to can take a little of me home. Story 123. Cremate me. Do not keep me in the house, and do not scatter me. Place me in urns at cemeteries so that people who want to visit can do so in a respectful and comfortable way. Story 124. I want cremation. I think we have many bodies taking up land already. I have talked to my daughter about it. She is my only child. It is in my will that she can do whatever she wants with my body. There are many things that can be done with the cremains. We have talked about putting them in an hourglass. I searched for options, and there are others as well, including placing them in an urn for display or burial, scattering them in a meaningful location, or incorporating them into jewelry, art, or even trees. Some families choose to have a portion of the remains made into a diamond or other gem for jewelry. Story 125. Read a book called Stiff by Mary Roach. She explores everything about what happens after you are dead, from post-mortem facelifts to military testing of new weaponry, to what I would like an enzyme soup. Throw me in the tub, let me dissolve, put everything left in a box, and plant a tree on me. Story 126. I would like to make America great again and be taxidermied and hoisted up on display in an action pose fighting government waste and extreme political correctness. Story 127. I do not give AF asterisk asterisk asterisk. I will be dead after all. Leave me to rot in the forest for all I care. I will say that cremation is probably more efficient. Story 128. Cremated. While I am worth it as a person and important to my family, I am not important enough to be filled with preserving chemicals and put in a metal box that cannot degrade or decompose. Once my time is done, I want to occupy as little space on this planet as I can. Story 129. I plan on being cremated in a funeral home sooner rather than later. But if not, I want to be buried. I do not know why though. Story 130. I was planning to be cremated and my ashes put into Altoid tins, so at my party boat cruise, my friends and family can scatter my ashes into the sea while listening to my playlist, drinking, and smoking heavily. However, over the years, I have developed many serious health issues: polycystic kidneys, polycystic liver, prostate cancer, and flesh-eating bacteria. I decided to donate my body to a medical teaching facility. I imagine a first-year student opening me up and gasping. I'm giggling now. Also, it's the only way I'm going to get into Harvard. Story 131. Cremated. After the funeral, I doubt anyone would visit my grave. At least with cremation, they can spread my ashes and be done with it. Story 132. Cremated. Burial is highly toxic. I hold no special reverence for this body of protein and fat. I see no need to preserve it. Scatter my ashes somewhere you have to sneak in to do it. Story 133. Cremated. I know I will be dead, but I cannot stand the thought of being buried and having spiders crawl all over me. Story 134. Cremated. There are over 8 billion people alive right now. Imagine if they were all to be buried. Then imagine another 9 billion people 100 years later. Story 135. Cremated, not paying thousands for all the unnecessary extras. My wife can plant me in the backyard for all I care. Story 136. I want to be cremated, so I do not waste space or contaminate the soil with all the chemicals funeral homes put in the body. Also, the casket deteriorates over time. After cremation, I would like my ashes to be mixed with cement and placed in the ocean to create an artificial reef. That way, I am actually helping, not hurting. My other choice is donating my body to science so someone can benefit from it since I no longer need it. Story 137. I find burial of my body repellent. Something about bugs, worms, and decomposing. So, cremation. Also, ashes poured into the Pacific. Story 138. Cremated for ease and cost. Buried if I can. Just buried in a random forest to provide nutrients that are not protected by a box made by the same things I want to provide nutrients for. Story 139. Neither. I want aquamation, composting, or to be buried in a pod to become a tree. I do not want to be embalmed, placed in a fancy box, or buried in the ground with cement walls. I want to be returned to the earth. Story 140. Cremated. No funeral. No gatherings. Nobody has more friends than when they are dead. Nobody makes time for me now, so when I am dead, forget them. Story 141. Cremation allows you to take ashes anywhere and do whatever you want, even run the ashes through a coffee maker. Burials are more permanent. My first wife was buried, and it cost $7,500 for everything. I wasn't keen on it, but she wanted to be near her mother. Story 142. Cremated. The mere thought of worms on or in me gives me the willies. I have had an aversion to worms my entire life. I am not willing to sleep with them eternally. Story 143. Cremation all the way. Who wants to be put in a box, buried in the ground, and have a stone set above their head? Not me. I was recently driving around a cemetery and was weirded out by all the overly elaborate gravestones. The creepiest ones actually have pictures of the people on the stone. Well, technically, the creepiest ones to me were the ones that had a picture of the wife on one side, the husband on the other, and a picture of their wedding in the center. But the really creepy thing was the husband was not dead yet. His picture was on the gravestone, but he was still alive. Why? Story 144. I want to be mummified and placed at the center of a gargantuan stone pyramid full of gold and dead animals, riddled with lethal and bizarre traps to prevent my treasures from being stolen. Unless the thief is really good at parkour. Story 145. Preferably cremated because I would love to afford a Hunter Thompson-style send-off, with my ashes being shot out of a cannon, followed by a fireworks show and an open bar for the attendees. The man knew how to party. Story 146. Cremated. It is cheaper. After dealing with funeral directors at my job for years, I have already told my partner that if he spends even one dime more than necessary on a funeral home, I will haunt him. Story 147. I would like to be cremated. As far as I know, my family will not be able to afford an angel statue on my headstone, which is what I would prefer if buried. My ashes can be turned into jewelry or paintings. It would also be nice to be fossilized and studied by future generations. Story 148. I would rather donate my body to science, but since I cannot, I prefer to be cremated. I do not need an expensive coffin to put my body in and be buried deep in the ground. At least ashes do not take up much space and are easier for others to manage. Story 149. Cremated only because buying a burial plot and headstone is too expensive. I have moved so much that I would not even know where to be buried. My family is scattered as well, so there is no family plot. Story 150. Cremated for sure. I refuse to burden my family with thousands of dollars for burial. I will be dead, so I do not care what happens to my body. Story 151. Neither. Some medical student is going to learn how to avoid harming a living patient by making many mistakes while practicing on my body. Story 152. Neither. What I want is, I think it is called a sky burial. Take the body to a remote outdoor location, make several cuts to the body exposing the meat, and let the birds and other animals have at it. Story 153. Cremate me, then bury me under a food-producing plant so you all can benefit from it one last time. Story 154. I prefer to be buried in the absolute cheapest casket available on the family farm, facing east. However, I do not really care if I am cremated or taxidermied. I plan on being dead by then. Story 155. Cremated. I am terrified of being buried alive. Also, I want my ashes returned to the ocean where I belong. Story 156. Cremation so my ashes can be combined with my late wife's ashes. One way or another, we will be reunited. Story 157. I would mostly want to be frozen in some kind of capsule so my body will not decompose before humanity can revive people. If that is not possible, I would choose to be buried. I am not someone who wants their body to be reclaimed by nature. Story 158. Cremated. I am an organ donor so they can take everything they can, then cremate me afterward. Then I am going to be buried in a cardboard box with a tree sapling in a forest somewhere in Norway. I am from Norway. This way, my relatives do not have to pay for a tombstone for many years after I am dead. What a waste of money. Story 159. Cremated and my children know what to do with what is left of me. 1/3 of me needs to be spread on Clearwater Beach where I married my wife. 1/3 of me needs to be put into a beer cup that somehow accidentally spills over the wall in right field at Citizens Bank Park. The last 1/3 they hold on to until the Philadelphia Phillies build their next stadium, if that happens in their lifetime, and they do the beer thing again at the new stadium. Story 160. I want a funeral pyre, but I guess they disapprove of that these days. Truthfully, once I am dead, I do not care what becomes of my body. I am dead, after all, and therefore have no use for it. Funerals, graves, urns, jewelry made from ashes, whatever. It is all for the living. I would rather my wife save the money to give herself better years than to bury a chemically preserved body with a headstone that will be forgotten and abandoned after her death. Story 161. I am donating my body to science. When they are done with me, my cremated remains will be returned to my family. I have been a nurse for 29 years. Story 162. This has been a difficult question for me since the family dog passed away last year. It largely depends on what my father decides to do when he passes, because he wants the dog to be buried with him. The dog was cremated and is now in a box. I remember reading that placing the box in the coffin of a person being buried is acceptable. If my father is buried, I will choose to be cremated. If not, I will be buried and take the dog's cremains with me instead. Story 163. Buried. I have probably an abnormal amount of death experience, and I can honestly say grieving is much more manageable after a funeral and burial. Cremation, in my experience, is just a person disappearing with no final explanation. So, because I am not inconsiderate, I choose burial to help those left behind grieve. Story 164. I want one of those natural coffins, the ones that disintegrate with the earth and grow into a tree. I think that is beautiful, new life starting all over again. Story 165. I used to do a lot of fishing, so I always thought it would be poetic justice to be caught and fed to the fish. Story 166. Cremated. I do not want to be buried, and I also do not want my ashes separated into trinkets or placed in an urn. I want to be spread in a place that means a lot to me, but I have not found it yet. Story 167. Cremated. It creeps me out to think of my decomposing body in the ground. I want my ashes spread because I don't want my body sitting in someone's house. Basically, I want to vanish when I'm dead. Story 168. Be a donor. Donate your eyes, your skin, or any organs, and let them use the rest and scatter me to the wind. Story 169. Cremated and placed in the same plot as my husband. After my mom died, I visited her grave over the years and kept wondering what she must look like now. I know it is unusual to think that way, but I cannot help it. Also, cremation is more affordable. Yes, cremation all the way, thank you. Story 170. Cremated, but I would like a tomb filled with items from different cultures and time periods to confuse future archaeologists in the region. Story 171. Cremated. My wife will be in charge because she is likely to outlive me. This is what she wants. In the end, I will have no say, will I? Story 172. Cremated without a viewing or service. I do not want anyone to suffer financially because of my death. If anything, I would like my family and friends to get together, share a meal, and enjoy each other's company. Story 173. I will probably donate my body. After they are done, I will be cremated, and my ashes will be given to my wife. Then I will be buried. Story 174. I would rather be cremated because I find cemeteries offensive. What a waste of land honoring the dead. But I will be dead, so do with my body whatever you want. Story 175. Cremated. I am traumatized from seeing my grandmother's body before cremation. My family can keep me around and use me for natural reasons in the end. Story 176. Actually, I would prefer both. Cremation for the actual remains, but in a coffin, I would like to have a life-size puppet of me lying in the coffin. Story 177. I don't really understand why people have an opinion on that. You are dead and will not know what happens. Burials and cremations are only important to those who want to say goodbye. Let them decide. Story 178. I want to be encapsulated in epoxy and put on display. I want my children to pass me down for generations. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.